Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
And welcome to the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 123. I hope that you all had a good weekend, were able to get outside and get out of the house for a little bit, safely of course, with the coronavirus. But one thing that I am quickly realizing is that you need to carve out some time to get outside, whether it's to take a walk or if you can run over and actually hit a few balls or even just go for a walk on a golf course, something. I kind of felt the walls closing in a little bit last week, so stay safe, stay cautious, but get outside when you can. I'm going to try something a little bit different this week, and that is to bring you a new episode each and every day. Yes, I have backlogged some incredible guests, so I'm going to bring you a new episode every day this week. However, I need some honest feedback on this idea. Is this too much? Should I space these episodes out a little bit? Please give me some feedback and let me know. You know, you can follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The website is thebackoftherange.com. Every single episode is available there. And please leave a review in Apple Podcast. The information on how to do that is on the Instagram page, so please do that. Today's guest is Jimmy Dunne. Jimmy Dunne is the vice chairman and senior managing principal of Piper Sandler. He was one of the founders of Sandler O'Neill, and under his leadership, it grew to become the largest independent full-service investment banking firm focused on the financial services sector. You know, before the coronavirus pandemic, the last event to dramatically affect the United States in such a manner were the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Jimmy lived through that and rebuilt his firm Sandler O'Neill even after losing 66 of its 171 partners and employees that day. You may be asking, what does Jimmy Dunne have to do with the game of golf? Well, good question, because while he does have some pretty impressive club championships to his name, you're only going to see one USGA championship appearance to his credit. Well, Jimmy is plugged into the game of golf in more ways than you could possibly imagine, and seems to know just about everyone. Jimmy said it himself, he has great friends. Well, some of his friends are guys like Larry Fitzgerald, Phil Mickelson, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas, and Tom Brady. And that list just goes on and on. Now, in the show notes of this episode, there is a link to a piece that Mike Tirico did on Jimmy for the Golf Channel. It is absolutely excellent. So do me a favor, hit pause, go into the show notes, and watch this piece. It will give you a great glimpse into the man before listening to this episode. Now, this episode was recorded nearly a month ago when I visited Jimmy at his home here in South Florida. It's only been a month, but what a different world we live in today. This is more than just an episode about golf. This is an episode about life. One thing that I think everyone can say about Jimmy is that he lives his life very well. So let's get this episode started. My conversation with the DunneMan, Jimmy Dunne. Jimmy, welcome to the Back of the Range, sir.
Delighted to be here. Looking forward to it, Ben.
This is quite incredible. So just to set the stage for people listening, I'm in the man's house. I'm in the man's office, and before we got started, you had to take a call or two, and you said, just take a look around, see if you find anything interesting. I haven't seen everything yet, but the pictures, the memorabilia, it's absolutely incredible. So let's start a little bit at the beginning. What's your earliest remembrance of maybe a golf souvenir or memorabilia, something that like I gotta have that on my wall?
That's a very good question. I guess it's changed over the years, but early on, the first place I ever played, the first golf course I ever played was a 9-hole golf course in Dix Hills, New York.
Okay.
So it's no longer there, but I guess I can remember much later when I was going on a trip to the West Coast, and I remember going to the Olympic Club and like buying everything.
Okay.
And then I thought to myself, why am I doing this?
What am I doing? Because you're a golf guy like the rest of us. So.
And I had more luggage going home than I had. It was. But anyway, but I've become more refined in my purchases as time has gone on.
Okay, well, it's good to know that Jimmy Dunne is just a complete golf degenerate souvenir guy, just like the rest of us. That just But yeah, the things around here are absolutely incredible. I'm going to ask you a tougher question later about some of your souvenirs, but let's start a little bit at the beginning about how you got into the game of golf. This is a question I ask every single guest just to kind of set the stage, because we're going to introduce a lot of things about your life and about your golfing career to listeners of this podcast that may or may not know everything. But just to set the stage, how did golf become part of your life?
Well, I was very young. My father was not a particularly good golfer.
Okay.
He loved the game. He appreciated the game. He loved that it was outside. He loved the code of ethics. He loved the people that you could meet and the people that were around the game. And so he and I built a little tiny chip and putt facility in the backyard. I mean, it was not a facility. It was just a hole in the ground.
Sure.
But I'd play that in the afternoon. I enjoyed it. And I guess as I got to be about 12 and 13, I was really just playing baseball and golf at that point. So I became more and more involved with it. And then my father would take me out to the public courses. It was a way for us to spend time together. And like anything else, I thought I was good. And that really helped, even though I had a rude awakening years later. But I thought I was like really good because everybody told me how good I was. Well,
Sure.
I wasn't any good, but they, I think that had something to do with it.
So you start playing the game and you get better and better, and then you start running into people that are maybe a little bit better than you. And then, I mean, I look around here and there's just so much Notre Dame around this office, around this house. And from football helmets to head covers to hats to, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So when did Notre Dame, because that is still such a very important part of your life, when did Notre Dame, how did you choose Notre Dame? How did Notre Dame become part of your life?
Well, it's interesting. Notre Dame, for the most part, represents a very big element of my non-golfing life.
Okay.
Truthfully, because I was, and it was an important path. Basically, when I was a junior in high school, I played okay, and I had some visions of grandeur, playing somewhere else. And I applied to a couple different schools. And my father didn't discourage my golf. In fact, we went down and met with Jesse Haddock. Jesse Haddock at Wake Forest was not really interested in me, but my dad knew a guy, and he took us to lunch. And I remember that very well, and applied to Wake Forest, was accepted. I was also interested in Rollins College in Florida, which I visited recently with my daughter, which is spectacular. But I used to caddy for a man named Bob Ty, who eventually worked for this, who has passed away. And Bob was an okay player and a good payer from a caddy standpoint.
Sure. That's important.
It was very important. And he was kind of in that cool guy crowd when I was 14. He and Joe Milan, they play like $10 Nassau's. Anyway, he lost somebody at the last second at some member guest pro-am kind of thing, and he needed an extra player. I was probably 16 or 17, 16 at the time. I got in the call. We went up to the North Shore to play, and we started to talk about golf and college. And I told him about my choices, Wake Forest or Rollins or Notre Dame and Villanova and Fordham. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, Jimmy, if you go to Rollins, with all due respect to Rollins, you'll have to basically explain for the rest of your life where it is.
Got it.
Whereas if you go to Notre Dame, some of the people won't like it, some of the people will love it, but you'll never have to tell anybody where it is. And that was sort of a first reality check for me, because I knew I wasn't good enough really to play golf, and I have friends that went to Rollins. Johnny Williams in San Francisco, a guy I grew up with went to play at Rollins. But I was not good enough where golf was going to be a career. So that was like my first goal. And then going to Notre Dame, golf was I early on, when I'd go out to the golf course and the whole rest of the world was going somewhere else,
Sure.
I felt like I'm missing something. So golf and Notre Dame really were not that connected till now, over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, when I've got very involved with the golf team.
Well, I want to ask you about that, but before I do, you graduated in 70. You graduated 78 in economics. Really fishing here, but Dan Rudiger, Rudy, was in 76.
Yes.
Any connection between you two?
None whatsoever. I graduated in
Okay.
78 without honor. And what happened was I distinctly remember I have wonderful roommates. And this one fellow who was the golfer, Stan Zuro, works out in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He was a really smart guy. And I can remember junior year reading in the Observer, which was the school paper,
Sure.
about this guy, Rudy.
Right.
And I had not heard the story previously.
Okay.
And then I said to Stan, I said, Doc, who is this guy, Rudy Rudiger? And he said, he's some unusual guy that lives over at the ACC.
Right.
And then, of course, I never thought about it again. And then the movie came out, I don't know, 15, 20 years later. And I remember I emailed him, or I called him, I guess, at that time, and said, I guess he wasn't so unusual.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. Well, I just saw that you guys graduated around the same time, so I thought...
Didn't know him.
Okay.
And I'm certain I was at the famous game, but I was definitely at that game, but I don't recall it being unique or anything. It was not that big a deal. At least I was not a manager. I was not involved with the football team.
Sure. Fair enough. Well, you're very involved with Notre Dame golf. One of our previous guests was the head coach of the team, John Handrigan, and I know you're very involved with it. Now, these kids, it was revealed in this episode, is that it's really cold up there in Indiana, and they come down to South Florida. They come down to other areas of the country for their practice sessions in the winter. Some of the places they come to are Old Palm and Seminole and just a lot of different places down here. So these kids on the team have to be absolutely thrilled. But let's flip that around. How thrilled are you to be so involved with that team, and how much joy do you get just being in the mix there?
I've really enjoyed both golf teams, the ladies' team and the men's team. The ladies have stayed here multiple occasions. Sort of like I've kind of made it not a formal goal, but I try to make an effort that every graduating class gets to Augusta one time, and I think it's a nice thing for them, and it's sort of how Notre Dame people treat each other. Yeah. So I've enjoyed that. And then we host them at the house. I have a very tolerant wife, and we've had both teams. We've actually had the teams here the last 3 weekends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is maybe a touch too much, but I like both. The great group of kids. I've gotten to know the men a little bit better this year because I was not here. I was at the AT&T when the ladies were here.
Yeah.
But I've really enjoyed getting to know them. They're really. I think about where I was at 18, 19, 20, and where they are, and it's night and day. Not just from a golf level, but from a maturity level. They're gentlemen. They're smart. They understand. They appreciate it. And we've had them through Seminole. We had a great day up at the Grove.
Okay.
We went up to Grove 23, which I love. Grove 23. I love the place. And we had them up there on the range, which is out of this world. And then we all played the golf course. And Jack Druger and Ian Shinnecock took on two of the better players, and they played pretty good. They got to the 16th hole, and then they went home losers.
Okay. Well, make sure we're going to leave that part of the episode. We're going to leave that in the episode. Make sure we get that. Well, that's incredible. So you're getting a lot out of them too. Like you're.
I enjoy talking to them. They're fun. They can take the needle a little bit. They're interested in business. They're interested in. They're fantastic. I'm at the point in my life where I'm looking for younger friends. Your whole life growing up caddying and everything else I've done, I've always had the benefit of having guys that were older than me that really paved the way. I learned a lot, and it's been spectacular.
That's great.
Well, now I kind of want to go the other way. They're a little too young, but I'm talking about, but I really like the energy, and they're great players. We played at the Grove with everybody, and then with a couple guys we played over at Seminole. They have very restrictive rules at Seminole. I don't know who put them in charge.
I don't know. We're gonna get to that because I know a guy. So.
We're very limited as to how much access they could have, but we had a great day, and Mike McCoy played with us, who was obviously a recent Walker Cup player. So that was a great thrill for them too.
That's great. We're gonna jump around because you're mentioning all these different things: Walker Cup, Seminole, AT&T, and there's different topics. So I'm gonna completely give up on chronological and just jump into this. So you just mentioned the AT&T. You played in that Pro-Am. You played in it several times. You've had gosh, you've had Smiley Kaufman, you've had Patrick Reed, you've had Phil Mickelson, you've had all these partners over the years. When was the first time that you got the call to play in the AT&T? How did that happen? Because most people watch it on TV. They see this once a year. They may not know how things like that occur.
The AT&T, I've always had as everybody has had, a long history with the AT&T or the Bing Crosby.
Sure.
And I can vividly remember as a 13, 14-year-old caddy watching the TV and my dad saying, "That's Dick Gelb. He's on our board." And it was like incredible. He said, and my father was so excited about seeing him on the TV.
Sure.
And he was not a professional. He was a good player, but he was a CEO of a company.
Right.
And so I can vividly remember that. And then of course the lure of Pebble Beach. And I used to always caddy for this fella Joe Milan, who has passed away. And he used to talk about the Canyon hole, the 8th hole being the most spectacular hole in golf. And Pebble Beach was so special that those were they were implanted in me early as that's a mecca to get to, the combination of the two.
Right.
And then I through a lot of friends out there, probably not the least being Sam Reeves, I got introduced to some people out there. And then I got invited and stayed with Sam. My first year I played, I believe, with Nick Watney. I'm pretty sure I did, and didn't play very well. Watney played great. And Freddie Couples played with Sam. And so I played with Sam a number of years, 1 year with Alafabo and Fred, another year I don't think I played with Duvall. I've played with Licklider. You've mentioned a bunch of the other guys, but I've really, really enjoyed it. When the invitation comes, I respond immediately, and I have no expectation of it coming again, but when it comes, I'm thrilled.
For an amateur, now you're an accomplished amateur. You've played in a USGA event. You've won club championships. You have a course record at a certain club upstate. But how much are you out of your element? Because a lot of my listeners, they're the average guy or average gal that plays on the weekends, and then if they play in maybe their member guest or a club championship, they're really out of their element. How long did it take you to kind of get used to getting into that element?
I don't know that you ever completely get used to it.
Right.
And it's interesting because I have either played pretty well or really poorly when I've played.
Right.
And I've played poorly a lot out there.
Okay.
First of all, I'm a fast player. I'm very conscious I can't stand the idea of holding anybody up, and you're going to hold people up. And Phil Mickelson, to his undying credit, before every time, we played maybe 5 times together, either as partners or in the group, he takes painstaking detail to say, "Jimmy, you're here for a reason. You couldn't possibly hold anybody up. Take your time." And I've never played particularly well, particularly as Phil's partner.
Okay.
And so this year I went out with an attitude that my score was going to be of some consequence. I was going to make an effort, which usually I'm just trying to get out of the way. Then I'm rushing and waiting, and I'm picking up, and I'm terrible.
Right.
This year I played a little better. I had a wonderful partner. I played with Troy Merritt, who was just terrific to play with. And but I don't know that I'm completely adjusted to it. Frankly, the people, they don't affect you. I'm not worried about seeing the people. And you're very rarely on TV, so it's not a conscious of that.
Right. It's
more just being I don't want to get in the way, although I've had wonderful pros that have never made me feel that way. It's just something inside my head that's,
Interesting. Because what's so fascinating is that, when you watch that, you see all these, whether they're entertainers or CEOs or musicians or sports stars and all these different walks of life. And I would guess at that level, it's more about the personality and the person you are that gets you that invite and gets you into the places that you're able to go to. There are titans in all sorts of industry. So,
well, I have good friends.
Yeah,
that's for sure. But I'm certainly not a celebrity, and I'm certainly not a titan. I would be, but I love golf. I have the best friends in the world. But I've always had the best friends in the world at wherever I was,
right.
Whatever stage I was. And I really appreciate it, and I have wonderful friends in the West Coast, and of course I'm able to share with my buddy John Bannon, who has said to me now that he's retiring as my caddy, he wants to be the manager. And I just said, well, the manager of what? He said, just of overall.
The manager of Jimmy,
yeah,
okay.
Well, but so the fact that we've been able to share it together, this sounds a little silly, but you can really only share a room now with either your college roommates or your brothers if you go somewhere. It's hard to imagine at 63 we're going to split a room.
Right.
Well, I can with John Bannon because we go back to when we were 16 and we've never had a harsh word with each other in whatever that is, 40 plus years.
Right.
And now we stayed at Dutch McKenzie's house this year, so it was quite luxurious. So we didn't share a room this year, but in the lodge we've done it, and I always say that what I loved about college, and I love about good friends, is in college I went to bed laughing. That's the last thing I did every day.
Right.
And when John and I used to stay that week, I would laugh. Now I've adjusted to laughing and then going to our separate rooms. So I've been spoiled this year. That's worked out better. But I just think the whole thing of, and each year it gets better because you know more people, your relationships are deeper, and I just don't know that I could have enjoyed it more than I enjoyed it this year.
Most of the people down here in South Florida and probably around the country, when they play golf, they throw their clubs onto a cart and off they go.
Yeah, I hate that.
I
hate that.
Well, that's where I'm going with this. How different is the game to you with a caddy as opposed to a cart? Like, what are people missing out on and not understanding?
Well, I think some guys that really understand golf well still elect to have a cart.
Right.
And even like the Notre Dame golf team, John's view is that they can play more holes in a cart.
Sure.
And I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. But I just find it breaks up the rhythm of the day. It makes everything more difficult. Now, as I play more golf up at the Grove, I better get used to it because I find myself, the carts up there are very fast and I'm chasing those guys and I'm 63 and it's affecting my game. So I've got to come up with a plan. I still walk up there, but I got to figure that out. But to me, it's integral to the game is the walking aspect of it. The conversation, the thinking. I hate golf carts. It's not even close. And I'm sorry to the golf cart industry.
No,
I love a caddy experience. I love getting different guys. I love learning a little. I just feel like it's an integral part of the day. Now there are a lot of guys that want to play 36 holes, and I get all that, but then I'll still walk them in the ground. I can outwalk anybody. So it's just, to me, it's a very important thing. I love the experience with the caddy. It's just not even comparison.
And you're a former caddy. I mean, you're a former caddy, and I know you're very close with your caddies. In fact, I mean, would it be safe to say I've heard a story that you're basically Serge Hogue's PR agent lately? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, he told me this great story how you're up there playing the other day, and you're saying, "Hey, we got a celebrity in our midst. This guy's been on a golf podcast."
Well, he has been, and Serge is a mini celebrity in his own right, and a great guy, and he loves Seminole, and he loves Pine Valley, and he adds a lot to the day. I mean, we played the other day, and having Serge and Schoolboy out there enhanced the day. Yeah. And I never tease anyone that I don't have a reservoir of goodwill with.
Of course.
Now, if I shouldn't say that because you can still make a mistake. I may perceive I have one and I don't. But you can tell when somebody, early on, if you've made a mistake, they will bristle, they won't be able to take it. I can really give it, but I think I can also take it. And I do that with caddies too. I mean, I spoke, Larry Fowler's my man up at Augusta, and, he actually has a little surgery today. And we talked last night, and, I said a couple things to him that, he laughed and laughed, and I love that laughter. I love those guys. Yeah. I mean, they add a lot to the whole experience to me.
Okay, so let's talk Seminole. Phenomenal course, tons of history. I mean, this was Hogan's place when he got ready for the Masters with George Coleman every spring, and now you're a member there, president of the club, and I guess one of the things I want to talk to you about is the Walker Cup. We first met. This is the first time we've actually met in the United States because we met over at Royal Liverpool last year, and the Walker Cup is coming to Seminole in 2021. you're known in your day job in the financial world. You're known as a great deal maker, and you have your philosophy on what makes a great deal. How did the deal of the Walker Cup coming to Seminole happen?
Well, it's amazingly simple, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, no, it's not. Truth be known, I had been thinking about it,
Okay.
and I thought, I love the Walker Cup event. I think it's unique, it's special, and I think when these guys get introduced, representing their country, that first tee is a very emotional place to be.
Yeah.
So I had been to the Walker Cup at Chicago Golf Club with my son CJ,
Okay.
and I enjoyed it enormously. That was a long time ago. I was out at the National Golf Links when it was there, and I just thought it was absolutely spectacular.
Yep.
It represents all the good things about patriotism and golf and competition, and I just love it. Obviously, I wish I would have loved to be able to, forget it. I mean, but I would have loved to be able to, and that's not even close.
Right.
But everybody would. But so I had actually been thinking about it, and to his never-ending credit, I had played in a tournament out in the West Coast.
Okay.
And we were flying back east after the hook and eye. And Mike Davis was in the front seat, and he had said to me, Jimmy, I'm a new member of Seminole. I don't want to be presumptuous. I'm not entirely sure how everything works there, and I do not want to get off the wrong foot. But do you think someday, at the right time, that Seminole would ever consider hosting the Walker Cup?
And I'm just not to cut you off, but when did this conversation happen?
I should know exactly. It was a Sunday in June, and it was way before it was at the National. So it was maybe
2011.
Yeah, maybe before then.
Okay.
And
okay.
And so I'll get the. I should.
No,
know,
no, that's perfect.
It was a while ago.
Okay.
And I didn't say anything to Mike. I hadn't said anything to anyone, and I had been thinking about it.
Okay.
And so I said, let's do it.
And that was it.
Well.
And then, that put it in motion.
Well, that's pretty close to it.
That was it.
And so after I said that, I then talked to a couple people that I have a lot of respect for that I didn't think would be for it.
Okay.
And I talked to them, and I heard everything that they had to say, and I still felt like it was something important for us to do.
Right.
And we then met at the National. We met over at Sabonic, and Mike and I and Tommy O'Toole.
Sure.
And a couple other guys from the USGA and me. And basically they went through a whole, and I said, look, this is how I think we can do it, and let's go. And then in October, I was at South Bend. I was at a Notre Dame football game, and Tommy called me and said, if we'd like to come. I mean, we never actually formally submitted.
Sure.
And so I said, let's do it. And then obviously everybody has really caught fire with it.
Oh yeah. Well, if I remember right, the only time that the general public is allowed at Pine Valley is during the final round of the Crumb Cup. They charge an admission fee, and that all goes to charity. So do you know what the fan experience is going to be like for the Walker Cup at Seminole?
Well, it's new to us.
Okay.
We've never had anything close to that.
Right.
I just say Pine Valley at least has that. They've hosted a Walker Cup,
right,
and they at least have that experience if you can get to Sunday afternoon. I've gotten to Sunday morning, but I was out of there Sunday afternoon the one time I was there. But one time I got there. But so I don't know what that was like, unfortunately.
Right.
I wish I could tell you I did.
Sure.
But I don't know exactly what to expect. I think it'll be in May. The weather should be good.
Yeah.
I think, we're expecting maybe 5,000 to 7,000. We'll do our best to accommodate everybody. It's a unique place. I think due to its history and its mystique, I think that a high golfing aptitude will want to stay and watch it, and we hope they do.
Yeah, I think it's been incredible. I've spoken with, so I want to talk a little about your playing on the USGA event. I've spoken to a lot of well, guys that you know, Jay Sigel and McCoy and Holt Grieve and Vinny Giles, guys that have USGA championships to their credit and numerous USGA championship appearances. And you qualified for the 2018 U.S. Senior Amateur. That is your lone USGA appearance.
That's correct.
And I want to ask you, we've just, since I've been here today, I've seen you take, calls and you're got, I can't even imagine the number of things that are on your mind during a call and also right now when you're thinking about other things. And how do you shut your brain off? And this would relate to just about anyone in any walk of life, but how do you kind of push everything away that you, in the business world or in your personal life, how do you shut off that brain and then focus on your golf to get the most out of your golf game?
Well, it's a very nice question because it's
assuming that there's a lot going on.
Yeah,
Okay, assuming you do.
When you're assuming there's a lot going on in my brain,
okay.
Which that's the first complimentary thing you say, that I could have more than one thing going on, which I appreciated. And the second is that I've played good enough to do it. The reality is sometimes better than others. And we had a great dinner here the other night. And I talked about how playing over the years with Vinny Giles has been so valuable to me, and I've always coveted his focus and concentration on every shot. And what I didn't really realize it until I actually said it that night is I've always coveted it, I've always admired it, and I've benefited from it. And playing with Vinny, I've always said I've had a lot of great partners, but if I had to play with a partner for my life, I would take Vinny.
Wow.
And now you have to understand, it isn't that I think Phil couldn't beat Vinny. I think Phil can beat Vinny.
Okay.
And I love Phil.
Okay.
But Vinny makes me play better.
Understood.
And whereas Phil, maybe I'm intimidated. I don't know what it is, but I have not played my best with Phil, and it is certainly not Phil's fault.
Sure.
Obviously, all right? But my point is that I've had this enormous, and I've observed it for a long time. I've appreciated it. And what I've been able to do is do it in other aspects of my life. I've been able to put that laser effort and focus into other things, and at times into golf, but not as consistent as I should through all the time. And I will do that going forward. One of the advantages of having a mediocre career is I don't feel like I've peaked yet. And I really believe I can still play good golf. I mean, I only get one day to get to the senior amateur shot, and that's hard. And now you can't. I can shoot 73 and play. I played really well, but 68 is going to get in. So I'm just very grateful that at that moment in time it all came together, and I had that round at Tavistock, and I'm grateful for Billy McGinnis to help me get there and coordinate it. But the answer to your question is I'm still getting better at that. I'm still learning to get better at that. But I have incorporated it almost in every other aspect of everything I do. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. It sounds like it's still work in progress.
Well, it's a work in progress for sure for golf. What I try to do on whatever the situation is, including 9/11, frankly, is I imagine an incredibly complicated, long math problem. And I look at the whole picture and understand where the equation is and how you have to balance both sides. Right. But I see then the enormity of the problem, and then I'll find a bracket within the problem that I can get started. Because somewhere in that problem there's 4 minus 2. And I know the answer to that, that's 2. As soon as you answer that, you got to multiply the other bracket. So what I try to do is look at the whole picture and then break down with specificity something to get started to build momentum on. And whatever situation, and candidly, 9/11, I did that. I do it every day at work. I do it in a deal. And I'm trying to do it better on the golf course and trying to just think about what is ahead of me and get target focused and get the 4 minus 2 part. Hit the fairway. That's all. Don't worry about qualifying. Hit the fairway. And so, sadly, I've been more successful outside of golf employing that than I could have in golf, but I'm not giving up on it.
That's incredible. I want you to explain to listeners what you mean by refined desperation. And then I'm going to take that and then ask you a question on that if you don't
Sure.
mind.
Well, I've only, this is my third podcast I've ever done, but that was the first one I did where it came out, and my buddy David Novak, who's a hell of a good interviewer like you, I don't know how he got me to, because I've played a million rounds of golf with him and we never talked about it, but somehow what I mean by that is when I used to interview people, and don't mean to be vain, but I think I was pretty good at that, and I think I think I've got a lot of evidence that I was pretty good at.
Sure.
Okay. To me, what I wanted to see, because when I went to hire someone, it would never be pleasant. You know, this writer for Fortune, Katrina Brooker, who we're now friends with, wrote an article and she about us, and she told it's a long story, but she happened to be talking to this young man. The young man, he said, "You're interviewing at Sandler?" "Yes." "How'd it go?" "Well, he's a really nice guy." And of course, she said immediately, "You didn't get the job because Jimmy is really nice to people he fires or people he doesn't hire. He is not overly nice to people that work there because he wants to see what they got." Sure. And I darn well do. And so what I would try to do, if I thought a man or a woman that I was interviewing had something that I thought had some talent, had some skill, and could be good, then I would try to figure out a way to create angst and to see how they reacted. And they had to have this unbelievable desire to succeed. It had to be more than just something else, because that's the number one thing you need. You need to feel like it's my success here or breathing. I'll take either. It has to be that important to you.
Right.
And so, and you see that, and then I actually could believe that I could actually see in their eyes the tension. I know it sounds a little crazy, but I can think about a lot of people I've hired this way over the years. But when you could see the tension in the eye, and then that desperation to succeed, but still the restraint not to be crazy about it.
Sure.
Then I had something. Now, honestly, I didn't plan all this out, and it all came a result because somehow David got me to say this, but that refined desperation where they're absolutely committed and dedicated to succeed, but so much that they'll go to the limit, but not go crazy. Does that make sense?
That does. And the reason that I wanted you to lay the foundation and the groundwork for that is because you're around a lot of PGA Tour players. You're around a lot of these college players. You're around elite amateurs. And who are some of the guys that you see that in, where they're just not there for the cushy golf life, or they are just like, I have to succeed in this, and I don't care who's in my way. I mean, I'm not going to be like you said, I'm not going to be a psychopath about it, but man, I am going to be a success in this. I'm going to get to the top of the mountain in the game of golf. That really, when you step back and look at these people, you're like, wow, that looks a lot like a 27-year-old kid that I hired, 20 years ago or something like that. Have you had that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, a couple come to mind, and the first guy, I would say Phil. Phil
Okay.
is desperate to succeed. I mean, he's crazy. He's absolutely crazy, but he's desperate to succeed, and I love that about him. Rory McIlroy, he's incredibly nice, and he knows this. He's smart, and he says things the right way. He will cut your heart out, and I'm all for it. Justin Thomas, he's going to be a big success. He's already a success,
Yeah.
but he's because it means more to him than other people. So I would say most at that level. I know you can't question Patrick Reed's desire. I mean, I understand at times that some things have happened, but Reed is a friend of mine. I love playing with him as a partner. He is, and I would say this, when he makes a bogey, the whole group feels it. And so
Okay.
That's good. And it was the same with Vinny Giles. With Vinny, it'd be a little more refined, but Vinny Giles was that way. I mean, and
Yeah.
so I just think that's really, really special. I would say this, though. It can manifest itself in different ways. So I would say, to me, it's obvious in the guys I've mentioned. But that doesn't mean in a different way that Ricky Fowler, doesn't have that same thing. It's just he presents it in a different way. He wants to win. I promise you he wants to win.
Yeah, how are your casual games with these guys? Because when I've always thought that, I know you're big about, like, if there's not a pencil in your hand, then it's not the same thing. It's not golf. I mean, if it's just a casual hit and giggle, like I cannot fathom you playing a game where there's breakfast balls and just raking away 4-footers. And I would imagine that it's you're all in when you're playing.
Well, I want there to be blood and pain.
Okay.
in every event. I don't fully enjoy it if there isn't pain and a little blood,
right,
and hopefully some tears. Now, not everyone is good in that arena.
Of course.
Some guys, they can't take it. It's not appropriate. And so, sometimes you'll wander around. And I truthfully, I don't like that.
Right.
But I've had no success recently, but, I've had a hell of a time recently with different partners against McIlroy. And not that it's really against him. He's it's important to me. It's not important to him. But, Larry Fitzgerald and I got beat pretty bad up in Boston with Tom and Rory, and then I tried to get another partner, and we got our butt. So I'm a bad winner, and I'm a good loser. So
okay.
So there's a lot of like teasing and back and forth, and for the most part, that's the beauty of it. I want there to be some angst for me and for them too. Now, obviously, there's not going to be a lot of angst with Roy McIlroy, but he and his dad and I played him and who was his partner? But God, that's terrible. I've forgotten already. But it was a good situation. Jerry and I had short putts. He had a short putt. Rory said, "Good." I said, "No," and then. Of course, I missed, Jerry missed, and Rory made. Yes, it's awful.
So backfired.
Who the hell was Rory's partner? But anyway, so I like that. I would say no again because. But anyway, would it be a mistake again? He'd make again, and I'd probably miss again. But I like there to be. Something on the line, and that's why I like, as bad as I play. And I just recently played in the senior club championship qualifier, and I didn't play well, but I tried on every shot. It was the best that I had, and I enjoy that. I don't enjoy just walking around. No, I don't.
You want there to be something on the line.
I want there to be something on it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So one of the things with that I just learned, the name of this podcast is The Back of the Range. Mm-hmm. You have a very unique role during the Masters.
That's right.
You're in charge of one of the best driving ranges, practice areas in the world. Yeah. You're running the range during the Masters. Just share a little bit of what that's like, because I mean, the average golf fan is never going to get to the Masters, and the ones that do are out on the course looking at it. But I've always felt that has to be one of the best tickets in town. So talk to me about that job.
Let me start from the beginning.
Okay, good.
Okay, I don't run anything at Augusta National.
Okay,
that I want to be crystal clear about that.
Okay,
even within the range function. David Dorman is if something goes wrong, he has to go see the chairman.
Gotcha.
Now, since we've been involved in the range, the performance has been perfection. So we have done nothing wrong for the entire time. But I'm like in charge of telling people where the fried chicken is. Okay, and I eat a lot of the fried chicken.
Okay.
But I am very fortunate to be involved in the Masters tournament, to have that role. I enjoy it incredibly. What I love, frankly, is watching the tone and the atmosphere change from Sunday to Thursday to Sunday.
Okay. And
it's really fascinating because I over the years, I've gotten to know a lot of these guys. I've gotten to know their caddies. I study anybody that's any good at anything to see what are they doing that I'm missing. I watch them closely, and I find it so interesting that on Monday or Tuesday, I'll be hearing, "Hey, DunneMan, what shoes do you have on today? And how's everything going?" Or Notre Dame got beat last night, or really,
Right.
to Thursday, "Good morning, Jimmy,"
Uh-huh.
or "Good morning, Mr. Dunn." I mean, it's amazing to watch. And then as it gets later on, you can feel it. It's palatable, and it's. Well, first of all, it's a spectacular event. I
Sure.
don't know if there's a greater event in sports than the Masters Championship. Now, I'm completely prejudiced. I haven't been to everything, but I can't imagine it being better, except they will figure out a way to make it better next year, which is really an unbelievable dedication and the work that everybody is involved with. So I'm there kind of like... although I did do one contribution. I did get I was making sure we had all the caddies' names, and then I'm that's a long story, but that made it much more of a convivial atmosphere, because then, frankly, sometimes when you see a pro or somebody that you've seen on TV,
Right.
you're apt to say hi, but he doesn't know you, and then he doesn't know what to do. So what I did is I memorized all the caddies' names, and so I would say, "Hey, John." And then he would stop, and then I'd say, "John, Jimmy Dunne," and then the caddy would then say, well, in that case, John Thomas was then caddying for Luke Donald. He'd say, "Luke, do you know Jimmy Dunne?" "Well, of course I know Jimmy." And so all that, do you say hello? Do you not say hello? Was over.
Brilliant.
Well, it wasn't brilliant, but I wanted to know their names too. Now, of course, I had, I committed them to memory. The rest of my boys, they got a little cheat sheet, which they looked at. Now, I have the cheat sheet now, too, because they change. But the atmosphere out there is very professional, but it's also, we're trying to make people comfortable and trying to also, be available so the fans can enjoy it. And it's just a spectacular experience. There's no doubt about it.
You ever get lost in the moment on the range there, just watching some guys hit, and you just the eyes just kind of glaze over, and like, who would, if they're selling a ticket to a guy to watch him hit some balls, and you're like, I just want to get me a chair and sit down for a while.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. It's amazing how good they are, and you actually can see sort of subtle differences as to. He's particularly good, he's either more confident or not, but you're not always right.
Okay.
I can remember vividly the first time Bubba won. I thought he was unbelievably tense Saturday and Sunday morning, and I could feel it, and I said, boy, I think he's going to have a heck of a time out there, but he won the Masters. So sometimes it manifests itself in different ways. But I'm always looking for something to make me a better competitor in any arena. So I'm watching them closely, and you'll see subtle changes during the week, and you'll see, but who's out there really ready to do something.
Yeah.
I would, and everybody you have to have your own style. Brooks Koepka is on a business trip.
Yep.
He's there. "Good morning, Mr. Dunn. Good to see you. Please call me Jimmy." "Okay, Mr. Dunn." And then he goes, hits his ball. Whereas other guys, and of course I know them better, it's a matter of style. You got to find your style. You got to be true to yourself, and you got to figure out how to get it done.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoy watching, and watching as the tournament evolves too. It's fun.
Interesting. You've mentioned Tom Brady. You've mentioned Justin Thomas, Patrick Reed, and the one thing that a lot of these guys have in common, and we can go down the line, but you really gravitate towards underdogs a little bit, don't you?
I never thought of it that way. I consider myself an underdog. Yeah. I really do. In everything I do. I mean, still now. I still... that's an interesting... I've never heard anybody say that. That's... I guess... some of the brilliance of Brady is how can we think of this guy as an underdog?
Hey.
And that's the brilliance of Tom Brady. I mean, he's got a magnificent family. He's got a career to die for. He's smart. He's engaging. I've heard he's attractive to women. I don't think he's particularly attractive, but it's the fact that we think of him as an underdog is a shock. But I guess I do. Yeah, I guess that was always been my sort of mentality. my mother, who was, not always right, she used to always talk about that sort of, it's an age-old thing, was that Irish need not apply. And so she really, she hated prejudice of any type. And she was not one to accept a mediocre performance. She didn't really care about the facts. Now, some of this probably wouldn't have been the best advice, but for me, it was fantastic. It really, it just allowed me to approach things different, which is a very much of an underdog mentality. And so I guess I do gravitate, but I don't know if we can really consider Rory McIlroy an underdog anymore. But
right.
But so he's not. But and I do root for him hard. But yeah, I guess absolutely. I would say it's I'm not a front runner, that's for sure.
Gotcha. So one thing we haven't spoken about, which is hasn't shaped it's not your entire life, but it's definitely a very important chapter in your life. And we've talked about how to discuss this in this episode because you've discussed it many times. It's something that's very well chronicled. Your company, was headquartered in the World Trade Center, lost 66 employees during the 9/11 attacks. You were 45 years old at the time. So Sandler O'Neill. This is something that's been very well chronicled. It was done magnificently by Mike Tirico and the Golf Channel. It was a phenomenal 60 minutes piece that was done the year following the attacks, which was, I can't imagine what that was like, trying to put that put the company back together and put people back together while you have a TV crew around. So that's incredible. That story is, as I said, very well chronicled. It's available for anyone to look up and see, but it's been such an important part of your life. We're coming up on 20 years since that's happened. Can you maybe share a little bit about how it has shaped your approach to how you've lived your life since that's happened, that maybe has not been part of your life before that happened, if it's possible?
Well, I'm interested actually in that question, and the thing that I have thought about and said so many times when something massive happens to someone or you lose a friend. We recently had one of our great pals and roommates, Jimmy Martin, succumbed to pancreatic cancer. And, there's a tendency to say, okay, I'm going to reshape values or I'm going to reshape priorities. And I've always tried to be crystal clear about the fact that I didn't learn anything from those terrorists. Their actions did not in any way put me into a position of reevaluating my priorities. I didn't all of a sudden think my faith was important, my family was important, America was important. So I don't give them, I want to be crystal clear that I got nothing from that, okay? But it would be unrealistic to say that the intensity of those priorities did change substantially, in the sense that when I put my kids to bed and I hugged them, I recognized that Chris couldn't do it to his. And so under any circumstances, I'm certain I held on for 10 or 15 seconds longer and harder. So the intensity with which I have gone after things was magnified in everything that I did. And I still think very much in terms of, you're not really entitled to anything. You better maximize what you get. Earlier when I asked my assistant that I'm doing this, so the phone rings a lot, as you commented on, and I like do a lot. So I don't want a day to pass where I don't feel like I've at least accomplished something. And some days I don't, and it's quite frustrating. But I want to do. The intensity with which I approach everything has been magnified. Now, the fact that it's close to 20 years is shocking to all of us, because in certain ways it feels like 10 minutes ago, in other ways it felt like 100 years ago. But I do keep in touch with different families and different young kids that, they're looking for jobs now, a lot of these kids, and we're, so I would just say I didn't learn anything, I didn't prioritize anything, but the intensity that I approached everything was magnified.
That's well said. Yeah, they're very well known that you've put. Oh gosh, how many kids have you put through college?
Well, I didn't, but the foundation. Yeah, the foundation. We did what we should do. I mean, we all did everything that we could do, and we continue to.
Yeah.
And I guess we're not to bring the full, but
No, you're fine.
But that's right. But the. September 11th was their day. September 12th was our day.
Yeah.
And every time you get a September 12th, you ought to be really grateful, whoever you are.
Yep. I forgot one thing I wanted to throw in at the very end. You could you've played a lot of the greatest golf courses in the world. You've been a member at, we'll say, more than one. You could easily just be the guy that gets to play golf at these great clubs, and that's it. But you're involved in restoration and course architecture a little bit with Core and Crenshaw. Is that correct? Can we get into that?
Yes and no.
Oh, but I guess I'm just illustrating that you're not just, hey, I'm going to go play my game and that's it. You're involved with bringing the Walker Cup to Seminole. You're involved with a little bit of course shaping. You really do care about.
Well, I do care
about the amateur game.
I care greatly, and that sort of came about the way most things come about for me. I have an idea. I recognize that I'm not the guy to do it, so I find the absolute best at it, and that's not an accident, and it really is not. So when I became the president of Seminole, especially to Tim Neer, who was my predecessor, I was determined that I was going to make sure I did the best that I could possibly do, and I might make some mistakes, but I was never going to play scared.
Sure.
Never, ever, and I don't play scared. And so I started to look at some different things on the golf course. And at Seminole, we have a lot of people that know a lot, and we have a lot of type A's. And so I really tried to think of, okay, I've got to have like a Supreme Court. And that's the way I kind of looked at it. And I've always had great admiration for Doak, for Gil Hance, and Tom. And but I'm a member of Sand Hills. And so that Core and Crenshaw thing, I think, is the greatest golf course that's been built in 50 years.
Wow.
Another one that I think is really, really good that I wish I had joined when I had the opportunity to is Friars Head out in Long Island.
Okay.
And both were done by Core and Crenshaw. And so I thought, I know the way they go about things. I know how serious they are. Before I decide to do anything, and I think what it started was I think it was the first tee. I knew that the halfway house that they put in shouldn't be there. And that wasn't even my idea. That was John Martin's idea. And so I thought, okay, if I'm going to get someone to work with, I want to get someone that is really, really knowledgeable. And I don't want to deal with 16 different guys at Seminole. And so I had a combination of Core and Crenshaw, and then obviously John Martin and now Kelly Miller, with the help of Bob Ford and Hal Hicks. I put the right team together. And all I was ever trying to do, and all we're continuing to do, is to basically polish the diamond. we didn't find the diamond. We didn't build the diamond. They were given the diamond.
Yep.
And like anything else, over time, you got to polish a few things.
Sure.
And that became a bigger job than I originally thought. And I think it's been a great outcome and continues to be a great outcome. But like everything else, I tell people I very rarely have a good idea. I mean, that's the honest truth. Even with Sandler, with almost everything I do. But when I hear a good idea, I can really implement it. And that's true at Seminole. So the real nuances, the things that Hal Hicks and Kelly Miller and John Martin and certainly Corin Crenshaw, I would not have seen those things because I was perfectly happy with the way it was. I thought it was, I felt like I was the luckiest guy in the world every time I drive into Seminole, and I still do.
Yeah.
But I do, whether it's John Doyle at Sandler or whether it's Ben Crenshaw at here or at Notre Dame, if you Jack Brennan, the people that we have out there. I didn't place Jack; he's the chairman of the board, but I like working with the absolute best. And if I have anything to do with who they'll be, I can promise you they'll be a hell of a lot better than I am. And so I love golf architecture. To your point, I've played a lot of golf courses. I read about them. I look at them, but I know I don't know enough. As they say, I don't have a lot of good ideas, but when I hear one, I can implement it. And that goes back to Herman. Like, I knew Herman Sandler was special.
Right.
I knew he was unique. I knew he was somewhat misunderstood because he was a little odd. But I thought he was, like, brilliant, and I thought he was compassionate and passionate. And so I knew that, this is a guy you'd be around. And that's sort of been a skill set. I think my father kind of got me always looking for that type of thing, always appreciating being around those kinds of people.
Well, you've been phenomenal with your time. I really appreciate you having me here, and I wanted to ask you. I could ask you a cliche one just to get you
Sure.
out on. Asking you something like. If you were PGA Tour commissioner for the day, what would you do? But I don't want to ask you that one. I want to ask you about what are you most passionate about with amateur golf? What would you like to see the amateur side of the game become over the next 10, 15 years? Have you thought about how to, and not just grow the game, and not just grow the game in the direction that maybe it should? I'm just curious what your thoughts on maybe the future of, the typical guy that maybe, plays a 9-hole round with his buddies or an 18-hole round with his buddies. How do we get more people playing competitively? As you said, when you get the pencil in your hand, it means more to you. How do we get the pencil in the hands of more golfers?
Well, I have a very definite view of that,
Okay.
which is hard to implement. Now, I think there are plenty of competitive golfers. I mean, I'm amazed. Now, we're Notre Dame's 5th in the nation, so they're good. Okay, they're
Right.
real good.
Yeah.
All right, but I'm amazed at how good they really are. And I'm not even and I'm talking about Notre Dame's teams that I play with that are not this particular team. This team is just overwhelmed with talent. I mean, I played with this Pat Kelly. He's got as much talent as anybody. You got Palmer Jackson on that team.
Yep.
So I think there's a wealth of good players. I don't think that's the issue. What really concerns me is the thing that I think is so important to golf, and I'm really worried about it, is the fact that in that caddy yard at Southwood Hole, when I was 11 years old, saying I was 14, there were a lot of young guys. There were a lot of, guys that, rough and tumble guys. There were a lot of different races. We were all, they're all there to go to do a job. It was about making money. It was about playing golf on Monday. And it was about playing gin rummy. And you got your status based on 1, were you a good caddy? 2, could you play it all? And 3, could you play gin rummy? And that was not only a great education, but that is where I really fell in love with golf. And I think you have sort of 2 issues. You have the great clubs that have a lot of wonderful caddies, none better than Pine Valley or Seminole. but it's a real job. I mean, you can make a living doing this, and I'm glad that you can, and I'm glad our guys do, and I hope we have the highest paid caddies in the world as far as I'm concerned. I know that's not a popular view. I don't care, okay? But what you don't have in a lot of these clubs, in the real great club, is you don't have a lot of real young kids. You don't see that. Well, you can't see an 11-year-old because he can't lie. He's got to actually show his identification. He's got to be 14, or maybe it's 16 now.
Right.
So that whole underbelly of guys that will become not golfers, frankly, will become lawyers and bankers and teachers and broadcasters, and that, to me, golf is one of two things. It's either instinctual or acquired characteristic. You can acquire it, but it's never quite the same. Whereas if it's instinctual, I can tell in 2 holes, within reason, if this guy grew up as a caddy. I don't know that I've ever played golf with someone that was a caddy that I've not enjoyed it. So what concerns me is you don't have this underbelly of really young kids. We have some out at the National Golf Links of America, which is great. They're trying to do a better job at Shinnecock, which is great. We're trying to get scholarships for kids. Druckenmiller has done an amazing job out at Oakmont. You see young people out there. But you have 2 things. In the great clubs, it's too good of a job. And in the other clubs that are more stressed economically, they need the cart revenue.
Right.
So where is that 14-year-old kid that is a caddy that becomes a Supreme Court judge and he loves golf?
And a kid working in the cart barn doesn't get the relationship building that a cat.
It's better than nothing.
Right, but
it's not the same.
Right.
And that is, now we have instituted something thanks to John Han and everybody but me, okay, at Seminole. I mean, I'm totally supportive of it. I just have done nothing other than, not nothing, but is to get some younger kids from the school, and we had somewhere between 4 and 8 really young kids. Now, what I was so happy about is the caddies were so warm and outreaching towards them.
Right.
Because in a sense, they could potentially be taking some of their income. So I was concerned as to how they would conduct myself. My concerns were not founded. They couldn't have been more welcoming. They're terrific. They take them to play sometimes in the afternoon. It's fantastic. I just wish somehow there were more of them. Now, we at least have some, so that's a start. 5 years ago, we didn't have any. But that's what I'm worried about with golf. And I've said it, and I haven't done anything about it, and I don't know what the answer is. And some of it is just the labor laws that we have, and some of it is just, the risks that people have. Nothing is going that way. All these things that are designed to sort of help people really hurt them. People won't take a risk if something goes wrong. And it's really, really unfortunate. So I just have, and I understand these carts, these golf clubs, there's an economic stress, and I just hate those golf carts, and there's no other way to say it. And I hate it at a multiple levels. I hate it because there's not 4 young kids carrying those bags. Yep. And then maybe this guy went to Harvard and he can help the kid, or maybe the guy went to Duke. I don't care where he went, right. But I wish if I could be czar for a day, I would. That's what I would do, and I would, because I think as good as some of these programs are, the first tier, whatever it is, they come in for a few hours, they're gone. You have to have a financial reason for them to be there. I knew the difference between the guy that paid me $7 and the guy that paid me $5. To this day, I still love cash. I loved the way the money felt in my hand. That had nothing to do with golf. That had to do with now I had some independence. In addition to that, I loved the way some of the older caddies looked at me when I knew when to knock or when to play for gin. And then I especially loved when they wanted to partner with me on Monday. We don't have that available at the level that we should, and that's a problem, in my opinion. I don't have a solution to it.
Well, when you get a solution, I want to hear it.
All right.
So, Jimmy, I appreciate this. This is more than just golf talk, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
So I hope my listeners enjoy this, and hope we can do it again. And
hopefully we can play Sunday.
hey, this is on recording. I hope we can do it too.
You got it.
Thanks,
nice
Jimmy.
to be Ben.
Yeah,
Thanks for
man.
your time.
And there you have it. Special thanks to Jimmy Dunne. What an incredible episode. What an incredible guy. Very, very fortunate to get his story. Make sure you're following along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Remember, every single episode is available at thebackoftherange.com. We are doing daily episodes all this week, so we'll see you tomorrow for another episode here at the Back of the Range.